This incident is highly significant because somebody actually got killed by the movement of the aircraft during the turbulence episode. I think about 30 people appear to have been injured, some of them quite badly as well. So, I mean, we're talking about very severe incident here. The other thing which appears to be true is that a lot of people, including I think the cabin crew, were not wearing their seat belts. Now, the indication there is that the crew didn't know this turbulence was coming, or they weren't expecting it to be anything like it actually turned out to be. So everybody on the aircraft was relatively unprepared, and that's dangerous. If you have your seatbelt loosely fastened at all times, this kind of disaster will not happen to you. It will be very uncomfortable, but at least you won't get thrown at the ceiling.
เส้นทางการบินนั้นประสบตกหลุมอากาศในระหว่างการเดินทางในระหว่างนั้นเนี่ยเครื่องอยู่ในด้านซ้ายของประเทศไทยทำให้นักบินประสานมาที่สุวรรณภูมิของเราว่าขออนุญาตลงฉุกเฉินที่สุวรรณภูมินะครับหลังจากนั้นเนี่ยเครื่องลงประมาณ15:50 นาทียอดผู้บาดเจ็บตอนนี้เนี่ยเป็นบาดเจ็บวิกฤตเนี่ย7 รายนะครับผู้ป่วยบาดเจ็บปานกลาง23 รายบวกลูกเรือ1 รายนะครับบาดเจ็บปานกลางอีก9 รายนะครับบาดเจ็บเล็กน้อย16 ราย
Turbulence of this severity is very rare. You only hear once every 5 years or so of somebody being either severely hurt or killed. Fatalities are almost unheard of, but I think about 5 years ago I recall one. Unexpected turbulence has always been able to hit crews. Before they fly, crews have a meteorological briefing so they know the kind of weather they're going to encounter en route. They also have devices on board to warn them where turbulence might be so that they can avoid it. For example, even at night time, they can see vigorous cumulonimbus clouds, which contain a lot of turbulence in their cores. They can see it on weather radar. And when they do see it, they never fly through a cloud that they know is there. They always fly around them. However, especially in the tropics, and this is where this incident happened, you very often get lines of cumulonimbus clouds and you have to fly between them. And they might be quite close to you. And in the vicinity of a very vigorous storm cloud, there will be turbulence. I don't suppose that is a reasonable explanation for this one, because if they were going to do that, I think the crew would have put the seatbelt signs on and people would not have been hurt. The turbulence could have been terrible, but if you're strapped in and all the catering trolleys on board and the crew themselves are strapped in, then you're not going to come to any harm. I've flown for many years as an RAF pilot on transport airplanes, Hercules. I've experienced turbulence, but I haven't ever experienced a meteorologically caused drop of 6,000 feet. It sounds terrifying. Frankly, very severe turbulence is pretty terrifying, even if you're thrown down a few feet and then up a few feet. It's the violence rather than the extent of the climb or descent that you have encountered. Now, what we're talking about, turbulence is caused by vertical movements in the air. I mean, we know all about horizontal movements of air. We call it wind, and we think nothing of it. And yet we know that wind, if they're hurricanes, can be extremely powerful and extremely damaging. Now, especially in tropical regions, if vertical air currents, known by glider pilots as thermals, and they can happen even in the UK, those air currents, if you've got an updraft caused by relatively warm air, then next to it there's going to be a downdraft. Now, if you hit a downdraft and then you hit an updraft, you get a big bump. And that is the nature of turbulence. all this talk about things called air pockets, it's rubbish. There's no such thing as a nature abhors a vacuum. You just do not have little areas of sky which doesn't even have any air in it. No, we're talking about an airborne analogy of waves on the sea. We know that when a strong wind passes over the sea, it can start out being calm and it can whip up into extremely big waves, which ships are tossed around on. The turbulence that we encounter in the air is the airborne equivalent of big waves on the sea. Pilots know that clear air turbulence, which cannot be predicted or is not predicted, can occur. One of the things that is what I just mentioned, which was if you have a line of tropical cumulonimbus clouds and you avoid the severe updrafts in them by not flying through the clouds, if you fly between them, there are going to be downdrafts in the spaces between, and those are not visible. Mind you, if you're flying through a line of QNIMs, you know you're going to get some turbulence if you fly close to them, even if not within them. But there is another area, there is another meteorological phenomenon that can cause severe turbulence and completely unseen, and that is a clear air turbulence caused by proximity to what's known as a jet stream. Now, a jet stream is a high-speed river of wind traveling a couple of 100 miles an hour, at least 100 to 200 miles an hour, through relatively stable air. At a high level. The pilots will know that there is a risk of that kind of turbulence and will try to avoid it through the weather briefing that they have before they take off. And of course, nowadays, with today's electronic communications and satellite communications, they can get updates for the position of the jet stream. What happens to create this clear air turbulence, because it doesn't generate any cloud, is that the air is tumbling in the boundary layer between the very fast air and the very still air that it's passing through. There's literally a tumbling effect. It's like if you see a fast flowing river, river rapids, and the water tumbles over rocks and stones. The air does that if it's brushing against anything. Also, if you're on final approach in very, very windy weather and you're looking forward to a nice smooth landing, but you're bumping around an awful lot on the approach, that's caused by wind passing over buildings, trees, hills, and mountains. The air is just tumbling. So there's no mystery about this any more than you would find it mysterious if you were in a ship and the ship was being tossed around on waves that you could see.